Well, you know, it's been a bloody interesting day out here. We're in Northern Rivers area of New South Wales, beautiful part of the world, and it's fantastic to be back at this very property where 4 years ago we tested Beta's all new range of back then 2020 model. They're a completely new platform. They brought out 4 new two-strokes, 4 new four-strokes with massive changes to engine, frame, bodywork, the whole shebang. So really good to be back here for 2 reasons. One, testing refined bikes on the same track and being able to compare those differences. But 2, just sort of reflecting on where, you know, Beta Italian company has come. Family-owned business, 4th generation, been around since 1905, kicking some amazing goals on the world enduro scene. But where they've come with their bikes, and I guess also what's interesting for me is the philosophy, right? So back then in 2020, all new generation of bikes, you probably expect that they just sort of sit on them for a few years and then 2-3 years down the track bring out mods. Typically that's what other manufacturers do, and it makes a lot of commercial sense to do that. But whether it's pride or whether it's itchy feet or whatever, Beta, to their credit, each year has brought out significant changes. You know, shit, that air let track needs fixing. Oh, we need the subframe there. You know, it's been a constant progression with the ZF and Sachs suspension. So literally for 21, for 22, for 23 models, each year there's been something pretty significant to talk about. Because of obvious reasons, I guess with COVID, you know, we haven't actually been able to test the whole range back to back like we did 4 years ago. So fabulous opportunity here today. We had 3 two-strokes, all bar the 125 two-stroke, the RR range, the standard model from Beta, as opposed to RR Racing, their up-spec model. It costs $1,800 more for each counterpart. So what's new on these 2024s? Well, it's a really interesting too, and we were fascinated because we had, you may have seen some of the content we've produced on a 23 model RR390 project bike, which we've absolutely loved and really put some protective parts on it, but not done a lot from a performance point of view. But let's just put these 24 ones in context. So look, I guess the big changes, and we're just going to keep it sort of fairly top line, is the stanchions here. They've machined them a bit differently to create some slightly different flex. We understand there's some changes in the internals, and certainly from the chassis balance improvements that we've felt, that would seem to be the case. The factory pretty tight about that kind of stuff for some strange reason, so that will be borne out in time. Probably the other really significant things is the radiators, different, more efficient, create more steering lock, which is something we complained about, particularly on the 4-stroke models. Different radiator cap, gone away from the plastic onto a standard one, create slightly narrower shrouds. Not obvious, subtle, and then I think the radiator louvers here, I think like they sort of caught up with a RR Racing model in terms of being scooping a little bit more. So your fork, radiators, seat, and it's a big one for us. If you guys listen to us, we've probably been a little, colourful in our language, talking about, calcified testicles and stuff, but, like a seat, not only, it's a key point of contact with the bike, and, no one wants a sore ass, particularly when you're riding long rides, but also, look, a softer seat can actually make suspension feel plusher, so that's a big thing. So change the profile a little bit. It's been difficult because they're working with a fairly thin profile to start with, but they've gone to, I think, a dual density. You can actually feel it. It's a little higher profile, much softer, and a lot of thought they put into it. So they've answered, they've answered some of the criticisms there. And then on top of that, the graphics. Last year, if you remember, the 23 models was very simplistic, so change those a little bit this year. A couple other tidbits, a little bit of changes on the brake line. As I said, the radiator cap. So I guess you'd just sort of say refinements. We're still looking at the 2020 model as a platform, but all those refinements. But as I said, 21, 22, 23, and now 24, have done some really significant things. So, and then I guess, look, let's also, there's been some model specific stuff. So for instance, on the 300cc two-strokes, gone to roller main bearing now. On all the 4-strokes, remember they got a 350, 380, 390, 430, 480, which you'd think would all step on each other's toes, but no, they're all very different personalities. But they've got some quite a bit of difference. I understand the whole inlet track, so both airbox and air boot, etc. Last year came out with longer headers to create more torquey bottom end. This year, the addition of that, or the mods to the air inlet track, is aimed at delivering more mid to top. So just sort of, giving the best of both worlds. And also on the 4-stroke, there's been some mods in the traction control. I want to say last year, 22 or 23, I think, the RR Racing traction control and dual swap map switch came down here and actually was adopted by the standard RR models. Really nice to have that option between, you know, they call it a sun and a rain map, and it's also got a traction control on there. A couple of people sort of were suggesting that it was a bit intrusive, that traction control, so they've sort of refined it, so it's less intrusive. So I've never sort of found, I've found it a bloody good thing. It only is something you need, you know, that intrudes when you really want it to. So again, testing 7 models, difficult to sort of, you know, really put that encapsulate that in a nutshell, but I think the big things that stood out with me, obviously seat, much more comfortable. Slightly narrower ergos, more comfortable, cranked over in ruts. Interestingly, you know, we had what, 6 or 8 journos here for a day and a half riding, not one loose bolt, a little bit of scuff graphics around here, but nobody crashed, you know, there was not like, shit, that thing was out of control. So just empirically from that evidence alone, things are reliable, they're user-friendly, they're easy to ride, they've got a great quality finish, and I think that's probably more true, more so now than ever. But I think, aside from some of that ergo stuff, the stuff that really jumped out at me, and this, you know, as I said, it's been a work in progress with the suspension. The ZF fork is probably, you know, the Sachs fork and ZF, the top-of-the-line version of it now. I think on the 23 is a little soft, great for you know, trail riding, great for tight bush, you know, where you're on the nose and steering the thing. But open grass track and you hit the picks hard coming into a corner, you know, it just unsettled the chassis a little bit nose down. Rear end seemed to be sort of flighty and, you know, just from a rebound perspective. So I think they've really improved that with the internal. So it'll be interesting to see whether they've done that in spring rates or valving or both, and or with shock. But you know, typically some of these hills where you're smashing down through things, you're spotting a roller in 3rd or 4th gear, and you're on the picks and you know you've got to pull it up and you're like, ooh, that's got a bit of a sharp edge on it. Ordinarily a year ago you'd be like, shit, much more composed this time around. So I think that's pretty clear that they've, you know, that they've done a good job with that. Engines, as I said, didn't notice big things with traction control. I think the steering lock, particularly was with 4-stroke and ride, you know, 2-strokes, the steering lock or the turning circle was not too bad, but people on the, you know, 4-stroke owners will notice that. Quality of finish I've mentioned, and it's, you know, it's pretty damn good across the board now. And the other thing that really jumped out at me today was adjustability. So I've already talked about the, you know, the dual map switch you have on both the 2 and 4-strokes. The 4-strokes get the added benefit of the traction control, but you know, on top of that, you've got you know, you've got your fork preload. You've got 9 turns, I think, and which converts into 9mm of fork preload. We mucked around with that a lot today, and that's a really cool thing because not every bike out there has that. And you know, if you've got different people riding it, you're riding in different conditions, you're riding in sand or really undulating terrain. That's a really big benefit, I think. Mapping I talked about. On the downside with adjustability, and we've sort of mentioned before, and you know, it's not so much pointing the finger at Beta as it is so much at Nissan. Like, a brake company's been around forever, make amazing brakes, but don't do an on-the-fly adjuster. So, you know, nor do they separate the free play and the brake height, you know, on the rear. What else? Downsides. Well, like I said, they fixed most of the stuff we complained about last year. We'll say the side stand's still too short, so it leans on its ear when it, you know, when it's sitting down. You know, but look, that's really not a biggie. We've got this one propped up on a rock over here. So look, they're just little things, and you can obviously sort of put an extra. They've got a nice little sort of shoe on here. But I think the other thing, and probably, you know, talking about the performance of these bikes, but where it sits in the market, I think the critical thing is really to talk about the price of the thing. So, you know, from a recommended retail point of view, obviously manufacturers are obliged to talk about right-of-way price, you know, which includes typically, I think, at about another $1,400. But let's just talk about it from a recommended retail price point of view, and without getting lost in numbers, if you sort of look at, okay, let's just sort of take the KTM group, which has got Gas, Husqvarna and KTM. So Gas is the most, you know, affordable one of those, you know, in that stable. So on the 2-stroke side, we're talking about sort of Betas being $700 to $1,000 under that. On the 4-strokes, $1,000 to $1,200 under that. You know, in terms of the differential, that steps up again when you go to KTM, steps up again when you go to Husqvarna. So in terms of value for money, and on top of that, the fact that, you know, I think Beta make a big point about, you know, how cost effective their parts are. you know, that's got to play when cost of living is a big part of the equation of everyday lives at the moment, but you still want to pursue your recreation bikes. Getting a bloody good bike for that kind of money and knowing that, you know, maintaining the thing is going to be relatively cheaper than some other bikes. And look, when I make those comparisons with prices, you know, obviously sort of, you know, the Yamahas of the world are similar sort of prices as this as well. So, but it's been a really interesting equation. It's been awesome, and we've talked about it before in quite a lot of content that we've done about, you know, what a fascinating story Beta is. They've just knocked over another, you know, E2 class, E3 class, and outright in the World Enduro Championships in the, you know, in the hands of Steve Holcomb and Brad Freeman. You know, and for us, it's just really interesting to see the progression and actually come back to the place where we saw them, you know, create these landmark models 4 years ago, and to see refined, user-friendly and even more rideable versions of them now. I think it's just been really nice to be able to sort of, you know, watch our journey. We've had a 390, 2023 model 390 is a project bike for a while. I haven't had a two-stroke model for a while, so the boys have been kind enough to let us take a 300 two-stroke home. Really enjoyed that today. Obviously, it's got some mumbo with a lot of adjustability and play, and we're looking forward to mucking around with sort of power valves and you know, all sorts of bits and pieces on that. So, you know, stay tuned for that. And but look, today's been awesome. You know, full credit to guys from Lowry Australia who, you know, really good blokes. They got a really good dealer network. I think they're up to about 36 dealers around the country now. And take a great deal of pride in what they do and their bikes. And I think they know they're sitting on some pretty damn good product. It's very competitively priced, and you know, I think there's good reasons why they've made big inroads in terms of market share in Australia in the last few years. And you know, there's no reason, given what we rode today, that we're not going to see more of that in the future.